Welcome back, friends. Every time I face the camera, I feel like putting up a tagline or singing a jingle when I think of coming in front of you. And advertising is all about this. Integrated marketing communication is all about creativity, colors, music, jingles, and so on. And we'll keep on following those in times to come. This section also has lots of references for you. And as last time also, I keep on urging you, to get involved. Last time we talked about consumer behavior and relationship of consumer behavior with communication for a couple of sessions or so. And there we tried to analyze how to look at consumers and how marketers, they tend to focus upon consumers with messages which are relevant to them and which make a difference. Now, today we will be going on for a specific discussion on objectives, budgeting, strategy and brand building. Now, this would definitely have an elaboration later on. There would be references in due course of time when we would go ahead. We would be specifically talking about costs and budgets time and again, or we would mention that. And then we would definitely be talking about the role of integrated marketing communication in brand building, all in due course of time, when specifically we would be talking of different modes in times to come. But today we will sort of categorically try to look at objectives and budget, and then role of IMC as a strategic tool, and then in brand building. So, here it is. Let us talk about objective setting and understanding budgeting decisions. And first of all, you see, we should focus upon the requirement of setting suitable integrated marketing communication objectives. We have mentioned about this, we have talked about this broadly as well as specifically in due course of time, but now let us slightly revisit few of the elements and specifically enumerate those elements with elaboration. Objectives, as we all understand, give a specific structure to how and why we would like to reach to the customers. And you see, as we all understand, objectives include precise statement of who, the target. We have that target in mind. Target are number of customers, and it's very important for us to understand and acknowledge this fact that when we focus upon target, an individual comes to our mind, and then we replicate that image in our mind in terms of number of individuals, that we developed a category of customers, that these are the people, and then from that larger category once again we come to individuals. For example, an organization is targeting a student, hence students, and then students and a student, because individual will be making the purchase, and the message would be going to every individual, although we have so many individuals in our minds. So, whenever we talk of objectives, always remember that we are thinking in terms of one to be multiplied or replicated in due course of time, and then we are coming back to the one again with specific release of that particular message. This is how the thought process is. And you see, that is why when we say objectives, they include who, then it is directed towards what is to be said specifically to that person, which would be appreciated by people like him, and when, what should be the time frame, should it be related to our convenience or release of a product, or should it be related to when that product is needed by that customer or those customers, when would they need that? That also has to be assessed, and this assessment goes on continuously. So, objective, that is why objectives are required, and objectives entail this kind of a thought process which always keep on going. You would be wondering that if we are creating messages, so should we be thinking in terms of every time we create a message? Yes, we do, but once we have created the message, then what? So, then the release of the message definitely matters, and that is where when follows who and what. Once we have decided who and what, then when is a very specific element, and through which kinds of modes, that we will see in due course of time. The other element is objectives must be quantitative and measurable. Now, it's really tough actually, but when, and especially when we are talking in terms of integrated marketing communication. You see, sales objectives can easily be quantifiable, but integrated marketing communication to be quantified, definitely we must strive for that. You see, for example, we can talk about the level of awareness we have generated. How many people have become aware of our product? So, this is a quantifiable kind of a thing. To what extent they have become aware, that also can be quantifiable, but again it is slightly a tougher deal basically. How many have been persuaded can also be quantified at the end of the day, because that persuasion yields results into sales or the objective which organization is carrying, and the objective which is the reason for this message to go to the customer. Interest, what kind of interest we have generated, what kind of a desire we have generated, and all these things can be measured in terms of feedback which we get from the people whom we target in terms of integrated marketing communication. How do we get that? Definitely we get that through primary research, and we get that through several kinds of TV shows, reality shows, online interactions and so on. So, there are several methods whenever we release one particular kind of a message, or we put up a name in front of the customer. You remember Kaun Banega Crorepati? So, the sponsors immediately knew that how many people are actually watching that particular show. So, just to assume that whosoever is watching the show and is sticking by the show would also be hearing the name of the sponsor actually. Hero, earlier it was Hero Honda Saregamapa, then Hero Saregamapa and so on. So, how many people are watching the show, it is related to the contest and how that is reaching to the customers and so on, and there are several other methodologies. Organizations, they go home to home and house to house to talk about that what kind of reach the message has created to their hearts, to their minds, what kind of, how have they acted upon that. So, but you see, there are measuring methodologies, and so the ultimate aspect is that advertising goals are to be defined and measured against results, and that is where the relevance of quantification of objectives and measurability comes in. Now, objectives must specify the amount of change. What change do you want after the release of this message? Do you want an incremental sales? Do you want the name to reach to larger number of people? Do you want any other impact or effect? Do you want larger number of stockholders to reach to your organization when you release a corporate image building advertisement? Do you want just want that people should know you? So, what is the objective? And that is related to the amount of change, percentage change, or let us say institutions, they resort to integrated marketing communication exercises to build up their image and perception, and then rankings also. Today it's a ranking era. There are several institutional global rankings, national rankings, wherein institutions, they they wish to perform, they wish to compete, And for building the perception, perception is a very integrated part of ranking system actually, or ranking criteria I should say. And perception definitely is built through what? Integrated marketing communication, through word to word, mouth to mouth publicity, word of mouth you may say, or let us say structured advertising, or let us say public relations, or whichever way. We will be talking about several modes later on, but that and some rankings are entirely based on perception. So, there you see the percentage change in the ranking, it matters. Last time an institution scored this much, last time an institution was included in this kind of a bracket, and you can go to different rankings. Almost all the students, they are worried about rankings nowadays. So you know what I am talking about. Objectives must be realistic. Is it so? I have put up so many question marks in front of this. You see, being realistic is related to if they are realized. Many a times beautiful communications, wonderful communications generating so much of recall, they do not generate that kind of an effect which is desired out of those. So, that does not mean that they were not realistic. You see, there we try to decide that ultimately the effect which they generated was destined to be that kind of an effect basically. Somehow we did not look for the specific measurability or criteria which should have been associated to that kind of an advertisement. For example, an advertisement we thought would be generating a particular kind of sales levels, and the constitution or the storyboard and the choices of the modes and different vehicles basically took it to the levels wherein it generated lots of recall. That means somehow our objective or measurability criteria was not correct actually. It was supposed to create create recall, which it did. So, we have to think carefully in terms of generating our expectations from a particular kind of a message or integrated marketing communication or a campaign. Later on we will see how it works. Objectives must be internally consistent, that is having a consistency all through in terms of positioning of the product, message, storyboard, everything. So, a coherence should be there and objectives must be clear, so that we may remember that how we should look at them. Now, let us go to the subsequent aspect of budgeting, because when we have decided upon what the message should do, the communication should do, we have to allocate a particular kind of a cost. I will spend some time on this, because ultimately you would wonder many a times that many successful organizations, they have this leverage of putting up lots of communication. Yes, they have, and that works for them. You see, some of the organizations, they spend hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising and communication. There is a huge lot of money which is engaged in this kind of a thing. Many, they have a crunch in terms of cost of marketing, and they try to focus on sales and sales force and retail chains rather than advertising and communication. So they do not have that kind of a leverage and advantage, because in earliest most stage they might not be having that kind of a liquidity or sales returns which could be utilized for this kind of a thing. So it's a matter of definitely compulsions many a times, but then you have to decide a budget, that what kind of a cost you would like to spend on this particular campaign, or let us say in due course of time on integrated marketing communication. So, budgeting decisions involve identifying the financial requirements for advertising and promotions each year and allocating the funds accordingly. You have to decide it beforehand, and remember, it is an expenditure. It is an expenditure which is desired to give you returns. So, you wish to calculate returns, but the money is spent basically, because it may or may not give that kind of a return basically. So, the key to budgeting is to maximize the profit for the given investment or so on. But you see, in terms of actual mm, uh, in actuality, when you write it in books, you call it cost of marketing. It is a part of cost of marketing. So, it is a cost basically. So, you look at it as investment, or let us say with the perspective of return, but it is actually a cost. So, it is an expenditure. So, the practical budgeting methods most frequently are the percentage of sales, objective and task, competitive parity and affordability methods. And I have chosen these specific 4 methods to be deciphered in front of you one by one for a short while. Although there are n number of methods which can come up and which keep on evolving in due course of time, and you will find so many when you look for the sources and the references which I will be giving you in due course of time along with this course, the names of the books and the papers and so on. But many a times I should caution you, while looking at those budgeting methods, one must remember that they are specific to a particular kind of an organization having a financial advantage or a huge sales advantage which exists for them. Sometimes it exists for the organizations who have decided to go for a very specific spurt of sales in terms of a very specific product, or they are working in terms of being a specific project which must give them returns. For example, movies, they have come for although they are made or produced for a very long time, but they know that initial response of the viewers that matters a lot for them actually. So, people might revisit or review that movie later on, but as far as 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks or initial revenue goes, so that is where they are focusing. So, for that particular levels or for that particular period, they would be advertising heavily. So and they would be assuming that this would be the kind of viewership that they would be generating, and there they would be going on for lots of advertising, and that also depends upon what kind of money they can involve. I will just give you one example. There was a movie called Lunchbox in India, and that movie did well. In fact, it earned quite a good revenue, and they very cautiously went for integrated marketing communication, not going for huge spurt based kind of an advertising. On the other hand, when you go for larger movies which have involved lots of production costs, they go for huge advertising and huge promotion campaigns, and you would find lots of posters and lots of messages and stars appearing in reality shows and so on, because they want a spurt of revenue from that movie. So here is the difference, and that is where I caution you. So broadly we will look into the commonly used practices. So here it is, percentage of sales budgeting. Now percentage of sales budgeting is wherein a company sets a brand's advertising budget by simply establishing the budget as a fixed percentage of past or anticipated sales volume. Past sales volume definitely motivates us to think in terms of the future sales volume, because the sales team is continuously in touch with the retail chain or customer, and they presume that this is going to be the flow of as far as future sales goes, depending upon the environment remains conducive. For example, COVID came in suddenly, so definitely it hit many organizations from all the sides, and their exact forecasting cannot be done. But definitely in case of regular growth, we can assume that we can think of 5%, 10% or so on, and last year we had this kind of an ad spend for this kind of a sales volume. So next year we can plan for this kind of. So we can go to preceding sales growth and advertising spend, and in relation to that we can go for that. But here one thing which is very important, I have talked about that earlier as well, because advertising and integrated marketing communication has a responsibility of supporting the product life cycle of products and services. So there these organizations, they think in terms of that what stage of life cycle they are actually. If they are in growth, they might not be going for regular percentage based increase in ad spend as related to sales. They might suitably reduce the percentage growth in terms of ad spend as comparison to sales growth. For example, sales, they are under growth phase of their life cycle, and they are rising from 100 units to 200 units, and while rising from 50 to 100 they had a proportionate ad spend, but from 100 to 200 they might not have same percentage of ad spend because they are under growth phase and customer is well versed with their product and customer is actually looking forward to their products actually. So, they might go for initial spurt of advertisement that Apple this is being launched, and that is all. So, they might not be spending that kind of a money at this particular juncture. Yes, definitely when the life cycle stagnates, when the number of customers they get saturated, then they might again go for larger percentage of ad spend in terms of percentage of sales. So, and then comes in objective and task method, and I'll again caution you that all these methods, they face criticism because they are relevant for some and might not be relevant for the others. So, it is more or less many a times trial and error, for a particular period actually. Then comes in objective and task method. Now, here planners specify clear objectives for the advertising, identify the tasks, and then to reach those objectives budget accordingly. For example, there is a particular seasonal production which they have planned, because that season definitely requires that kind of a production to support a sales demand or product demand, and to support that they would go for larger advertising because competition would also be doing that. Although that will be seen in competition based advertising budget basically, wherein we will be talking about parity. But here again you see, forecasting for a particular period or looking forward to a particular kind of a period, or there is a very specific objective that there is let us say a new product line variant which is being launched, and that launch requires lots of introduction based kind of an advertising for that kind of a product. For example, a new variant of a shampoo is being launched, so that has to be supported by lots of So, objective and task is related to several kinds of things which come in between when you have planned for annual, and there, for example, you have to go for some events to support an ongoing exercise to enhance the sales of a newly launched variant. For example, an automotive model which you were planning to come for, and suddenly that model is ready and you want to launch that. So, you will add some budget to that particular kind of an exercise of launching of that particular automotive model. Now, coming to competitive parity method, definitely as I have just mentioned that you look at your competitors, how hard you want to hit them, or are they snatching your market share. Coke and Pepsi, I do not think that they would be spending less dollars than each other. Huggies and Pampers, or levers, for example, in comparison to Procter and Gamble, Patanjali in India. Gadi detergent definitely has given a tough time to many organizations in their category. Nirma, washing powder Nirma, they spend a lot of money at that particular kind of a time. So, competitive parity, what kind of ad spend people are doing, because you do not want to get away from the eyes of the customer actually, because many a times your customer and their customer, they overlap. Many a times your customer can move to their side if you do not put up a show in front of the customer, or you do not remain in the memories of the customer, and so on. So, competitive parity methods, they are important for many organizations, especially fighting a war with each other. Now comes in affordability method. Now, it's a basic methodology which I mentioned about, wherein how much I can afford. After all, whatever I desire for does not matter, because the kind of money I have is the basis for how to go ahead. So, firm spends on advertising only those funds that remain after budgeting for everything else. Many a times you have several necessary expenses to be made, and you have to have the sales force on ground, you have to have your retail setup charged up, you have to have your points of purchases in place, you have to spend on several other things, and you have to coordinate with several other activities related to being there in front of the customer, and at the end you feel that there should be some integrated marketing communication, or let us say communication or specifically advertising for the customer to have some recall, or let us say to have an impetus so that he can move from his home and move towards your retail setup or your avenue and so on. So, you see, the challenge is to demonstrate that advertising and other marketing communication initiative produce results. So, and I would not say that any of these or many others which I have not mentioned here, they are formulas. No, they are not formulas. They are specific frameworks which are being used by several kinds of organizations, and we notice those, we think about those, we analyze those, and we realize that which one is working for whom, and then we try to put up those things as models. So, definitely organizations which are coming as followers or second in line, they definitely follow one or several of these models at one part of time. Many of you who would be joining advertising world, or let us say you would be working with budgeting departments of the organizations wherein you would be responsible for allocating budgets or deciding on budgets, you would be thinking in terms of these categorizations which I have just mentioned in front of you. So, I will end the discussion on budgeting here, and I will be coming back to you with the role of advertising in strategy, long term strategy, or advertising or integrated marketing communication as a strategic tool in times to come. But from now onwards, the specific aspect of budgeting and objectives should accompany your thoughts. Whenever we think in terms of integrated marketing communication, the question which should come to your mind must have a portion of cost associated with that question. That, for example, if we go for choice of several modes of advertising or messaging to the customer, we use television, we use newspaper, we use internet, suddenly it should come to your mind that what would be the budget, and can this organization in concern or the product which I am having in my mind would be affording this kind of a budget, or would it be actually required at this particular life cycle stage? Would it be rational actually for putting up that kind of a money? And if I somehow reduce one or two modes, would it be actually not producing that kind of an effect? So, the whole exercise would be meaningless at the end of the day. That means spending 100 rupees on two modes might not produce that kind of an effect, and spending 110 rupees on three modes might bring in that kind of an advertising effect or integrated marketing communication effect. So, that is the thought which should be coming to your mind now onwards, and especially when we think in terms of IMC to support organizational or product strategy at the end of the day. So, I will end up this session here and will come back to you later on. Thank you. Bye bye.